Hi guys, it's me James. It's June 12th, 2020. It's day 90 since the since quarantine began here in this part of the Philippines at least. But overall in the country, it's already been under quarantine ever since, a.k.a. total lockdown, and it's Philippine Independence Day. Now, 2 weeks ago, I finally came back to work because the government decided that to ease quarantine restrictions and allow people to return to their work just so they could restart the economy, blah blah blah. Although certain restrictions still remain. For example, there's still no public transport, so that means no buses, no public utility vehicles around, like buses, jeeps, taxis, and only only trains are allowed to function, and local government units are providing free transport for their citizens, including my city, my home city. They're providing free rides to people going in and out of the city to from a particular point in the Metro Manila region. I'm not sure how things are in other parts of the country because I know that Metro Manila is the current quarantine restriction only applies here in Metro Manila, but it's been very difficult since quarantine restrictions were eased. So we're at GCQ, General Community Quarantine. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's back to normal because because people are still not allowed to leave unless they have to, such as people going to work or people going to buy essentials. Pregnant women are not allowed to leave their homes unless they have appointments and stuff. Children children below 18, I believe, or 21 are not allowed to leave the house, as well as including senior citizens. It's been very difficult trying to adjust to the so-called new normal. And uh, just for the record, things are never normal here in the Philippines, so there's no such thing as normal, whatever normal means. For one thing, I did not expect my body to not adjust to this new arrangement. For starters, because there are no public transport. It's been very difficult for me to leave work, uh, and then go to the nearest train station. Depending on my route, um, I usually walk for several kilometers before arriving to my train station, all the way to where I would need to wait for my free ride to just back to my hometown. So that's where a lot of stress are being absorbed by my body. Usually, I would do that on a normal day whenever I couldn't get a ride because of rush hour, where there are too many people riding in the buses. There are very long lines of people waiting to get a ride at passing jeeps, passing taxis, and whatnot. Yeah, but to do it on broad daylight when the sun is still hot, I think it takes a toll on the body. And just so you know, I felt the need to leave the office earlier than usual, is because, for one thing, I don't want to get home past curfew, because we still have curfew. Curfew hours was the start of curfew was moved from 8 p.m. to 10, to at least there's a 2 hour extension to still get home. But at the same time, I don't want to get home very late because as it turns out, even if, for example, I leave at 3:30 p.m. or 4 p.m. instead of my usual 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. leaving departure time from work, I still come home 4 hours late. And part of part of the hold up is I have to wait for a very long time to get to the free rides provided by my city government. It doesn't help that uh, around that time of the day, around 5 p.m. to 6, traffic congestion is at its worst for some reason. Perhaps because there's no number coding scheme in effect. I think, I don't know, but all I know is that there are a lot of cars and trucks out on the roads, and yeah, it can be quite stressful to say the least, and and add to that stress is the confusion of where I should wait for the free rides. Sometimes it's in front of where we should be waiting, sometimes on the side, or sometimes it's on the actual place where we should be waiting for. But no one is telling us where exactly. I've actually tweeted this to the Twitter handle of my city government and the mayor, and they were very clear on my. They didn't make any clear answers to my questions. Among them, on where exactly we should be waiting for the buses, for the trucks, for the trucks that would provide free rides for their citizens, and yeah, it's pretty annoying. And this week, I my health took a bit of a hit, not because of COVID-19. Thankfully, I got the stomach. I got bit by the stomach flu, so I was out of commission for 3 days, and I was in the middle of doing urgent work in time uh, for this week, and yeah, I was not prepared to just leave everything off. So that adds to some additional stress that I didn't want to have. And the stress the stomach flu caused to my body led me to have some mild fever. I was feeling shivers all over my body, in addition to aches. And yeah, I really needed time to recover. And then I thought, okay, now that I'm feeling a bit better, maybe it's time for me to get back to work and just finish what's left of the work week. But apparently, Friday is a holiday. Friday is a holiday because it's Independence Day. Uh, the Philippines is celebrating 122 years since it first declared independence from its colonizer, Spain. But technically, we were independent since 1946 after nearly a quarter of a century, I believe. 45 years. 45 years. 45 years of US colonization, or as some would say, US occupation. But its colonization is what we see here in the Philippines, because it doesn't really matter, because we still view America in a sort of half good, half bad light, depending on where you look at things. And right now, the United States is not having a good time right now, trying to, with its past aggressions, past with its history, trying to catch up with the present, with all the protests, all the rioting caused by one act of police brutality, the and that really caused people to just say enough is enough, although we've seen movements and protests like this happen in the past few years, I think this is the largest that I've seen happening to date, only amplified by the stay-at-home orders due to the current coronavirus pandemic. So people defied stay-at-home orders to gather and protest this act of racism, uh, this act of systematic racism that has been a part of American culture for a very very long time. And it's time for people to have a conversation about this, to make amends with its past, and just really try to be better human beings, and uh, make the United States be what they label themselves to be, the land of the free and the brave. And I have really good friends who live there. I have family there, and I really really hope that change truly does happen. Maybe not now, but I hope very soon. And it's not just the United States who is seeing this wave of protest. The the after effects of the black of the protests organized by Black Lives Matter and other organizations also helped spruce up other similar protests to to protest against racism in other countries such as the United Kingdom and the Netherlands, where there is a strong history of racism and and injustice towards various communities, depending on the country, of course. For example, for the Netherlands, they have a tradition of a festival called Sinterklaas, based on the legend of Saint Nicholas, who is a saint who lived in what is today Turkey. And for the Dutch, Sinterklaas has a helper. His name is Black Pete. He's and he was called Black Pete because when Pete came down the chimney, he looked all the stains, all the suits from the chimney made him look black. But if you look at pictures online, if you want to know about Sinterklaas, all pictures of Black Pete, all the all the people who dress as Black Pete look like people wearing funny costume. They wear blackface, and they wear weird uh, African inspired wigs, afros, whatever. So, and they say that it's not racist, but you tell that to people who they are trying to make fun of. So yes, it is racist. That's racist connotations, because of course, why did Black Pete's skin suddenly became completely black coming out of a chimney? And of course, would the same thing would the same thing happen to Sinterklaas? And yet he came out of the chimney just fine, being his jolly old self. So the only kind of protest that I really am a bit frustrated about are those who think that there is no such thing as a pandemic, that this is just some sort of conspiracy, or those who don't feel like the thought of or the thought of having to stay home for their safety. Those are the people that I'm most frustrated with, and especially there's video. Many of those coming out to protest are holding placards like, "I want to go back to my sauna. I want to have my prom." Blah blah blah. Those are very superficial things that don't necessarily need to have, and they should be fine without them. But no, they think it's that those things are very important, and that those are what, and because they supposedly strive in in their in what they view as their freedom, as their liberty. But freedom is something that you have to take good care of, because freedom can be abused. Uh, but uh, there is a saying that I've heard, that freedom is not absolute. What's my take on that? Let's see. I think freedom is a powerful tool, a tool that is most effective when it is used for good. But when it is used, or when it becomes vulnerable to abuse, bad stuff happens, and those kinds of protests are the ones that that shows the uh, that strongly displays the the bad things that you can do when you abuse your freedom. And some would probably say to me that there's no difference between those pandemic protests to the Black Lives Matter protests. And my answer for that is that there is absolutely a big difference for that, because for the protest shouting Black Lives Matter, there are protesting about freedom from oppression, freedom from systematic racism, freedom from discrimination, freedom to be treated uh, with with uh, with equality, with humanity, be able to be given the same opportunities as everybody else. Uh, and those are just one of many various issues that the United States have need to address, because it's not just racism, it's economic inequality, it's uh, immigration. They have issues with immigration. They have issues with with the indigenous community of the United States, the Native Americans. There are also protests against the 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 continuing of immortalizing Confederate Confederate generals, and of course Christopher Columbus, in the forms of statues and monuments, because they have no place in a country that supposedly prides itself as the land of the free. So there is justification for those protests. And people say, if Black Lives Matter, then all lives matter too. Of course, all lives matter, but we also have to take into consideration that Black Americans are one of the most oppressed communities in the United States. That doesn't mean to say that this negates the struggles of all other immigrant groups who came into this country, but their experiences are vastly different from the experiences of community of people whose ancestors were forcibly taken into a land they didn't choose to be in, who were forced into slavery, to servitude, and, and died without being able to get back there. And then generations later, their descendants continue to suffer what racism has sowed when their ancestors first arrived in the Americas. So there you have it. And speaking of protest, one is happening right now here in the Philippines, in celebration, in observance of Philippine Independence Day. There's one happening in the University of the Philippines. Another, I believe, in the Luzon University in Manila, and I think else also parts of the country as well, including Iligan, from recent news reports. So these protests are being labeled as a mañanita by the protesters themselves, as a way to put shade to the professional treatment over over several notable people from law enforcement and from the government who were able to get away from violating COVID-19 and quarantine guidelines. This is in direct reference to a surprise early morning celebration to celebrate a certain police general's birthday a few weeks ago. This man's name is Debnar Sinas, I believe. The bold Sinas, and of course, this is also a protest against the passing of the anti-terror bill, or what we now call it as what it should be called, a terror bill, where it amends an existing anti-terrorism bill, anti-terrorism law that we already have, and 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 has questionable provisions that were deemed that are deemed unconstitutional because it goes against what our constitution provides as democratic rights for the citizens of the Philippines. I don't know if I worded it right. Basically, there are provisions in the law for which it contradicts everything that the Philippine Constitution of 1987 strives to protect the rights that are guaranteed to all citizens of the Philippines. And right now, the Philippine National Police, the PNP, have been warning since earlier this week of not having more than 10 people gathering to protest, and they have also threatened protesters that uh, they will arrest anyone who go there en masse. And surprise, surprise, when I woke up this morning, I saw a tweet on Twitter, and I saw a picture of the University of the Philippines grounds in Diliman, Quezon City, where the protest was already up and running, and all the protesters were gathered and perfectly lined up in observance of social distancing rules. So, and also there are at what I assume to be private grounds, even though it's a public university. I think the the administration of UP have allowed protesters protesters to gather there, because why not? And also there are also protesters in within the vicinity of De La Salle University in Manila. Although they were being intimidated by passing police along Taft Avenue in matching camo uniforms. So yeah, but they will not be intimidated by that. However, it saddens me to have heard that protesters in Iligan City were arrested for supposedly violating quarantine guidelines. But yeah, it's just freaking annoying, because quarantine guidelines on mass gatherings have no is on mass guidelines on mass gatherings have no bearing over democratic rights to gather, to protest, especially if we're going to protest against something that we deem that we have to, as a people, have to criticize for the people in order for the government to listen to us, the people who they are supposed to serve. uh, I hope that this terrible is completely uh, does not go does not become law. Although it just annoys me that both versions of the law, from both the Senate and the law or House of Congress from the House of Representatives have passed, have forwarded their recently approved versions of the law to the office of the president for the president to sign. So it's gonna be a matter of time before he signs it into law. That among other problems that we already have, and this is one bill that we didn't really need at the moment. We need help. We need the Philippines to be able to cope with this health crisis that we are already dealing with, not additional measures to control our movement, to control our speech, to control our freedom. So I don't know if I could be arrested for just speaking out about this, but I'm well within my right to speak out against it. So yeah. So that is how my life has been for the past 90 days. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'll let you know if I can. This has been James, and I'll see you guys next time. I'm sorry for the very long vlog, but what can we do? Bye. Paalam. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas at mabuhay ang kalayaan.